All right, Steve Robertson joins us, genespage.com, 247 Sports. He made the trip to Tempe, Arizona. Mississippi State loses a ball game where they were dominated in the first half. Played some better football on both sides of the line of scrimmage in the second half. But they're not to the point, as far as a program right now, where they can play that poorly on offense and defense, especially on the road, to start the game. And Steve Robertson joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. And the show is brought to you by Superior Foundation for all your foundation repairs, superior.ms. Also, Spring Street Cigars in Starkville, super place to smoke a cigar this weekend, whether you're going to Hardy and the game or either one. Hardy Thursday night in Starkville. And then they've got a smoking lounge upstairs and downstairs. Great place. And also brought to you by Two Brothers and their amazing food and experience there at Two Brothers in the Cotton District. And don't forget about Older Brother, the new bistro that they just opened. High-end bistro. Older Brother is the sister restaurant to Two Brothers. All right, Steve Robertson. They can't run the football and they can't stop the run. So how much do you think that they can improve on that, or is it just a personnel thing?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, we knew going into the season that there was not really an explosive back in this running back room. I mean, they went out and tried to get two out of the portal. You end up getting Booth, and I do think he has some ability. But that's just a guy making the jump up from the G5. And, you kind of got to play with what you got. You can't sign a free agent at this point. But, yeah, I mean, the talent in that room is something that Jeff Lebby said way back in the spring is like, hey, that room has got to get better. Now, he did say toward the end of fall camp that the room had made some improvements. But, so far through two games, they just have not been able to do much on the ground. And, we knew on the defensive side that, they're going to be a little bit light up front. Then you have three guys that are injured and don't play against the team that you knew wanted to run the football. But we tracked it all week. We tracked it all week about what Arizona State was saying in the media. And they talked about, hey, we want to limit plays. We know that Mississippi State wants to go out there and run 100 plays on offense. So we've got to go out there and do our best to limit that. And they've got a good running game. You saw it against Wyoming. And Scatterbo was outstanding. He absolutely was. But I think some of that, too, is not getting dominated by another player. Some of this is schematically. I mean, State coming out in a three-man front, I thought was a very, very interesting decision. And then you get into the half and you change and you do some four-down linemen and even some 50-type fronts in the second half, and lo and behold, you get some stops. I thought that decision to go out and try to attack a running game when you knew they were going to try to run between the tackles with three-down linemen was questionable, to say the least. But you did make some adjustments. It was just too little too late.
Okay, so let's just cut right to it. They put themselves behind the eight ball, not getting that game. I mean, Arizona's not that good. One-dimensional QB and made Scatterbo look like John Riggins. Took a long time for Hutzler, and I get he's new, but that's who was hired, to make an adjustment. I don't know what I've said this all morning. I don't know. I can't claim to call plays and all that, but I can at least look at it after a few series and go, may want to add a defensive lineman and walk some people up in the box. Okay, offensively, were you surprised? I was surprised at how much they struggled early. I know they got it going. I know the touchdown going in the half. They played better in the second half. That wasn't P.I. on Craver. I mean, he weighs like 142 pounds. I mean, it was ridiculous, but it happens, okay? Were you surprised that the offense struggled that much in the first half, Steve?
Yeah, to me, that was really the surprise of the ball game. I mean, I knew that Arizona State was going to make some plays in the running game, because they're kind of built for that. And as you mentioned, I mean, quarterback-wise, and we are Monday morning quarterbacking this, right?
Sure.
I mean, obviously, but the reality of it is it's apparent through two games that Leavitt is not going to be able to challenge you down the field at Arizona State. He not at this point in his career. And in a game like this, you think the anxiety of the moment actually favors you. So you got to go out there and make him uncomfortable. And, I think you got to go out there and have a heavy box and make that kid beat you. And so that was a little bit of a surprise. But the big surprise to me is I really thought State would come out and find some success early against those corners and be able to kind of run some tempo and then kind of get out of the gate. We talked about that last week, and State needed to kind of survive the first quarter, and they didn't. And you get behind, and lo and behold, you mentioned the OPI, and that was a questionable call, but, it is what it is. The very next play, you got your senior quarterback trying to do a little too much there. And rather than just take the sack and call it a day, instead we try to throw it out of bounds, trying to make a play. It slips out of our hands. Next thing you know, it's returned for a fumble. And at that point, it kind of felt like the game was over. You said, well, I think State may be able to come back from a 2-score deficit. Next thing you know, you look up, it's 30-3. It's an embarrassing development at that point. I give them credit for not quitting, but at the end of the day, you lose the ball game. And offensively, you've simply got to get off to a better start.
All right. Steve Robertson, genespage.com on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line, brought to you by the amazing street tacos at Two Brothers, which may be the only thing that we'll celebrate this fall. Toledo's coming into town. Jason Candle can flat out coach, Steve. I'm actually surprised he's still there and not at a Power 5 school, and I fully believe that he will be at a Power 5 school sooner than later. So this is an inexperienced staff. They took a loss that they thought they would win, even though they were the dog. And by the way, the missed PAT cost me money. But what are you expecting this week? Some kind of big bounce back? They play a lot better? Or this team is such a work in progress, it's going to be even smaller than baby steps?
Now, I do think they bounce back this week. And you mentioned Jason Candle. He's a guy that offensively has done some very good things, and they have really struggled offensively this year. You look up at the scores, and you say, man, the scores are a little bit gaudy. They've done some things in special teams. They've had some pretty good play defensively. They got a starting quarterback that's completing less than 50% of his passes. They don't have a rusher that's got over 100 yards combined through 2 games. And so this is a team that comes in with some question marks offensively with a guy that is historically known for being a very good offensive coach. And this will be the first road game of the year. I do think State wins this game with some margin, but this has got to be a get-right game, right? This is not just about winning. You got to figure some things out. You got to be able to go out there and get out of the gate offensively. You got to get some stops early, and you got to get some separation before the half in this ball game. As you mentioned, the State's in some respects, you say it's 2 games into the season, Steve, you got 10 left to play. Well, you're in a position now, you got to win half of those games. And if you look at the schedule, once you clear, like right now you would say, okay, they'll get Toledo and UMass. At this point, and I'm not being negative, I'm just trying to get it real, right? At this point, who would you say right now in the Southeastern Conference that Mississippi State is expected to beat right now as we sit here today? And
not one team, not even Arkansas.
Exactly. Right.
I think they can beat Arkansas, Steve, at home, but Arkansas gave away that game on Saturday. I really like the mojo from their QB. They haven't gone through what MSU's gone through, and they've got better personnel, Steve.
Well, I guess we'll see, like what the teams look like by the time we get there.
True.
Like 2 years ago, right? Everybody thought, it's going to be a great game with KJ, and then KJ didn't play, and so that's the thing about a running quarterback in the Southeastern Conference. You better have a bunch of them, when you get an SEC play, because there's going to be a lot of wear and tear on quarterbacks. And so, yeah, you're 2 games in, you're not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, yeah, there's some things I think that kind of got exposed last week. And you know as well as I do, Bo, college football is a game of mimicry, right? You're like, hey, these guys came up here and ran the football and didn't really get much resistance until late in the ball game. Well, let's just go up here and run the football until they prove they can stop it. And that's what you're going to see. And so Mississippi State and Coleman Hutzler in that group, they're going to have to find a way, because they're going to see a lot of interior runs until they prove that they can stack people up and force them to pass the football.
All right, on a positive note, people are saying I'm way too negative on the text line. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. But I got to call it like like I see it. It was just a disappointing performance. They weren't ready to play. All right. Steve Robertson, genespage.com, and his board was wide open yesterday. Let's go some positives. The play score going into half was beautiful. Okay. Shapen takes a snap, kind of boogies towards the line of scrimmage, and then floats it over to Booth. Those are things that you haven't seen a lot of in the history of Mississippi State. The catch and throw to Coleman was that dude can scoot. Mosley had a nice play, and the Craver play would have been great if it wasn't the phantom PI call. So with the passing game, there were some things I think to look at, Steve, and say, hey, I can get fired up about that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And again, it just took a little while to get going. And I give Jeff Levy a lot of credit. You know, of course, it was a very limited media corps there, but but right out of the gate, I asked him, hey, what'd you learn about your team? And I always think that's a great question to ask because, Levy's walking down the tunnel and he's got some things in his head he wants to get out, right? So you give him the opportunity to do that. The very first thing that Levy comes out with, I got to get these guys in a position to get off to a better start. I got to get these guys ready to go. And rather than come in and say, well, we didn't have this and we had the elements and it was hot out here and they gave us red chilies in the tacos instead of green chilies. He could have come out there with any number of things and make excuses, but he didn't. He came out there and rather than say, the players did this or I didn't think it's me. I've got to make sure he took accountability. And I think that's the one thing that I walked out of that press conference and I said, you know what? I thought that opening answer was a really good one. And he answered a lot of those questions that we had prepared. And of course we asked him about the run game and you can see the frustration in his face that, that you're not able to really have this two-pronged attack the way that he envisions it right now. And they got to figure that out. But that was one of the biggest takeaways for me is that Levy just comes in there right out of the gate and says, hey, this is on me. And it seems so genuine to me. Like there's some other guys who come in there and they give you the cliche, right? I mean, it's like, hey, you're going to point the thumb, not the finger, and I'm not just taking a shot at Joe. But, I mean, that's just kind of – you see so much of that. And I thought that Jeff Levy came in there and was very authentic about this. And he goes, hey, we're going to get it fixed. And I believe him. I do. I trust that Jeff Levy is going to do some good things here at Mississippi State. I don't really have any question about that. And I think that he will do some good things this year.
Okay. You're listening Out of Bounds. We're visiting with Steve Robertson. Tough loss over the weekend in Tempe, Arizona. Game should have never been scheduled, but it was, and they went out there and they lost. 2 years ago, they went out there and they won. But different deal when you got a coach that's got 20 years of head coaching experience under his belt. Who knows what Jeff will be 3, 4, 5 years from now. Sadu. Yeah, well, let's go back to the offense. I think a lot of it too, Steve, is they were on the damn sideline so long all night. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you could see, I know you were there. You could see the frustration, and I loved it, the frustration in Shapen's face. I mean, he's mad as hell at himself, at what was going on. But I think you know this too. You can't get any rhythm on offense if you're over there sitting on your helmet all night, right?
Absolutely. And that was the game plan. And again, we discussed it all week. I mean, it's like it should have been a surprise to anybody. Arizona State is limited at quarterback. They've got a stable of running backs. And, of course, Scatterbo is the guy that it's like, hey, this is a physical guy. He's got Power 5 shape and ability. And so we're expecting him to go out here and do some things. So they just get out there and ride behind that, So, yeah, you're trying to shorten the game. And that's exactly what they did. And it felt like, when State goes out there and you kind of get off schedule a little bit and you're thinking, well, we got to give the football back to these guys. It's like we hadn't been able to stop them. They didn't punt in the first half. And so they scored their first 5 drives of the game, counting the first drive of the second half. And for all intents and purposes, the game was over. And you could tell Shapen was like, you know what, let's just go see if we can't get some things going. And, the big play to Kevin Coleman, that is just something to get excited about because you hadn't probably – let's be honest about that. You hadn't had somebody like that since Terrell Grindle, right? They could really just, take that 8-yard hitch and then outrun everybody to the end zone. You hadn't had that guy at Mississippi State, in a while. And to be able to get that guy was pretty big. But, I Shapen's got good leadership, but I think there's some there's some versatility to his game that, and you start making comparisons and people think you're crazy, but I think he's the most athletic quarterback State's had since Dak Prescott.
Yes.
And, that can do both, right? That can run and also pass. And I think Shapen's probably a better passer than Dak was at this point. But all that understood, I think you've got a guy at the quarterback position that can win games for you. And I think that's what's going to happen sometimes this year. I think Shapen will just kind of will the team along. But the question is going to be hey, can you get enough stops to give him the football enough to go, make some magic?
All right. Anything else? And I thought the tackling, I didn't understand the 3-3-5, and I don't understand. I can watch the game and just go, damn, I wish they'd put more people in the box. But the tackling, even with the 3-3-5, I was disappointed with the point of attack and point of contact and the collisions that seem to go to Scatterbo every time.
Yeah, he was falling forward. Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing too. A couple of times they stacked him up a little bit, and I thought Isaac Smith said it well in post game. He said they kind of addressed some of that at halftime. Guys, you got to wrap up, and you got to get guys down on initial contact, and that's it's a good barometer in that respect. This is the quality and size of back that you're going to get at times in the SEC, but even faster, right? And so you got to take this tape and learn from it and kind of get ready to roll. But, I thought it was the most important game on the schedule, and now you've lost it. So now the season isn't over, but now you're going to have to upset somebody to get into a bowl game somewhere. And I think that is probably the expectation many people had. But, if we had gone out there and lost this ball game, 31-27, and it had been kind of a shootout, I think people would feel a little differently. But, I think that the first half you basically get dominated other than one possession offensively. And there's just a lot of people are like, well, hey, I would just encourage people to put pause. This is game 2 in year 1.
No doubt.
Under Jeff Lebby.
No doubt.
Absolutely.
Hey,
so,
you are.
Of the moment.
Yeah. It's a good point, Steve. It's unfortunate, but this is where you are. You're in a rebuild with the first-year head coach, and you're going to have to be patient because you don't need to keep going through head coaches. Jeff's got a lot of the stuff, and I think you just nailed it. He nailed the quarterback. Shapen can ball. You hate to waste him in his 1 year if they don't get another year because he can win you games. Auburn would walk over hot coals for him, and so would some other teams. I don't know what A&M's going to do. We'll see what they do at quarterback. There was something else I was going to ask you about. Defense. The spread's 10 points. What do you make of that?
I think that's probably accurate. Again, when you look at the offensive numbers, for Toledo, and then having to go on the road for the very first time and play against an SEC defense. I think State's going to be okay this weekend. But again, it's not just about winning the ball game and covering the spread. State needs to look good, right? You got to get your mojo back this weekend, and that includes getting out, probably going out putting up 14, 17 points in that first quarter. You got to get out. You got to get out of the gate.
Yes.
And you're back home, and then get some juice going into next weekend. Because let me just tell you, Florida's got athletes. I know they're struggling right now, but they're going to line up, and they may even go too tight and just say, "Hey, we're just going to go.
Absolutely.
We'll just go run it to the game." You're going to see until you stop it. You're going to continue to see it. That is the most true statement in the history of sports. When you're competing, once somebody finds out there's a weakness they can exploit, you are going to see that week in and week out until you fortify weakness.
What's the latest on Dinkins?
Yeah, it was he didn't travel. I know some things got out there that he did, but no, he didn't travel. And he expected to be back this week, and he just wasn't ready to go. And with his history, right? You just simply can't chance it. You're going to need him. He is one of State's most talented defensive linemen. You got to get him right. And so I think there's probably a good chance he plays this week. But that was Levy told us last week it was going to be a game time decision, and then it wasn't. He didn't make the trip. So
Travion
did. Yeah, Travion played.
I saw him make a play in the second half, a play that I expected him to make a lot of those type plays when he signed. But I didn't get his rep count Steve. What was it high?
He played a good bit. I haven't. David put up the participation numbers this morning. I don't know about snap counts, but yeah, he played a good bit. And again, I go back to what was it, a month ago, and some of these source reports come out that he's out for the year. Whatever. It's I don't know. I mean, I cover the team all the time, and I'm always amazed at the things that get out there. But State was short 3 defensive linemen last week too. Eric wasn't here, and Deontay obviously, and Dink. But you got to get those guys back, and getting healthy will help a good bit. But I think schematically there are just going to be some things you're going to have to do. I think sometimes you have to put the opposing quarterback and put the anxiety on him.
Sure.
Right? I'm not just going to let that guy hand it off 40 times a game. Right. I'm going to stack the box. I'm going to make you beat me. And I think in hindsight, you look back at that, and that's probably the approach they should have taken from the get-go. It's like, hey, we know this kid is somewhat limited. He's a redshirt freshman. So they're going to probably script some things up to kind of, control type passes to get some confidence. I'm going to make that guy beat me. I'm not going to let Scatterbo beat me. And of course, again, we're Monday morning quarterbacking this, but I think that was probably the fatal flaw in the game plan there is rather than let Scatterbo be the guy, the veteran guy, carry the mail, I would have made Levitt do it. I would have stacked the box, and I would have made that kid make some throws and prove that he could beat me. Because you saw multiple times he'd have guys open, throw the ball out of bounds. It's a tough road in the Power 5 to play quarterback as a young guy, and I think we could have made the road a little more difficult. But again, I got trust in Jeff Lebby, and I suspect a big bounce back this week, and he'll figure it out. He will figure it out. But fans need to understand Mississippi State was not expected to make the playoff this year. I'm not trying to sit here and damper expectations. I love football as much as the next guy, but you got to be fair to Jeff Lebby and the staff and give them the opportunity to kind of get their legs under them.
No, I agree with that. It's not fun to do, and it's not fun to wait. And we don't like the word patience in SEC football, but it is what it is. And I could not agree with you more on that part. Travion Williams has got to step up and play a lot and play big-time football. And some of those other guys on the edge have got to figure it out too. All right, Steve, good luck with your message board this week. It's wide open.
Man.
See you, bud. You joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. And the show is brought to you on Mondays. It's brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Competitive rates are powered by your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Lunch today is brought to you by the Highway 61 Burger at Burgers Blues Barbecue in Dogwood, Flowwood. B3 in Dogwood, Flowwood. Hope you have a great day. If you missed anything, it's on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. We would love for you to hit the subscribe button. See you tomorrow.